Hello, and welcome to the Student Experience podcast, where we'll be chatting to members of the University of Suffolk community, giving them the opportunity to share their experience with us. I'm Sam, and I'm a member of the Student Experience and Engagement team, and in today's episode, we're joined by Anna Nunn, who is a learning and teaching librarian. We discussed her role at the university and how students can access the library and learning services. So, Anna, would you like to introduce yourself and your role at the university?
Yeah, so I'm a learning and teaching librarian, and I've worked at the University of Suffolk for around 5.5 years now. So I've been here quite a long time, but I haven't always been a learning and teaching librarian. I started as a library assistant and then moved up the ranks basically, and did lots of different jobs in lots of different with lots of different priorities, I guess.
Okay.
And then in the past around 2 years, I've been a learning and teaching librarian. And what that entails at the University of Suffolk is looking after information skills of students. And it also means looking after collections. And what we mean by collections is all of the resources you access through the University of Suffolk. So all of the online subscriptions, all of the books, all of the ebooks, all of that sort of stuff. And I look after technology, business and arts. So it's quite a mixed area, I guess. Lots of variety, lots of different subjects that I'm looking after. So I have quite an expansive range of resources that I'm looking at and supporting and purchasing on a daily basis.
Sounds very varied as well. Can you tell us what a day-to-day activity or day-to-day day will look like for you and the activities in that?
Yeah, so it's quite drastically different at different times of year. So in the teaching year, so when students are around during term time, there's a lot of teaching. So we'll do both like embedded teaching sessions where I come into your course and I'll do a session on something that your course team is asked to do. So for example, they want a little bit of an introduction to using the library resources, or they want you to learn how to do advanced searching. And I'll come in and I'll do a session that could be an hour or 2 hours or something like that. I also support with optional sessions. So we have like optional workshops that run throughout the year that aren't a part of your course, but you can sign on to whenever you feel like it. So I do those as well, and I'll run those online. And we sort of just go through our content and, respond to any questions, and those usually are about 45 minutes long. We also do one-to-one sessions. So a lot of the time I spend meeting with students on a one-on-one basis and supporting them with whatever it is that they need. Learning and teaching librarians typically help with finding information. So whether that's navigating Google, trying to figure out how to access your databases for your subject, access the resources on your reading list, all the way through to researching for your dissertation, we'll offer one-to-one sessions for that sort of thing. And those are usually about an hour long. The other side of my job is the collection side of my job. So I look after all of the resources in the areas I've sort of mentioned, and in a typical sort of block, we have to prepare for that block by looking at all of the reading lists and buying everything on that reading list to make sure that those resources are available. So that takes up quite a lot of time as well, because we have to check your reading list, we have to check to see if things are available in the library already, and then we have to buy things if they're not available. So as part of that, it's managing a budget as well and making sure that we're not overspending or massively underspending. And I also have a little sort of sideline to my job as well, where I line manage a couple of people. So I line manage our graduate trainee librarian, and I also line manage the library services supervisor as well. So I sort of have a bit of oversight of how the library service runs on a day-to-day basis as well. So a day-to-day day basically can vary massively in what it looks like. And I guess during term time, it's very teaching focused. And then outside of term time, it's much more project based. So we'll be a bit more like what needs to be done that we haven't had chance to do during the academic year. And we'll pick up some of that stuff. So it's a bit more free, I guess, out of term time.
So you mentioned about the one-to-one sessions and that you provide to the students. How's the best way for students to access those services?
So we have our academic skills hub, which is accessible on the library website, just a booking link. So if you click onto the academic skills hub, so you basically need to scroll down a little bit on the main first page of the website, you can click through and access our one-to-one booking pages and our workshop pages. So you would just book a one-to-one. You can have them online or in person, or you can even have email appointments if you choose. And you can book either with a learning and teaching librarian or an academic skills advisor. It's important to understand the distinction, because obviously it's really frustrating if a student books with a learning and teaching librarian. It's not something we can actually help with. So the distinction mainly is that if you're wanting help with research, finding information, all of the stuff around like the bit before you start writing almost. So even like thinking about the question you're asking, trying to refine a question, learning and teaching librarians are good for that and for helping you evaluate information and try and critically engage with it. The other side of things, so academic writing, critical thinking, that sort of thing is more of the academic skills advisor remit. We both help with referencing. So if you have a referencing query, it doesn't matter too much who you book with.
Where you go.
Yeah, but if you're having issues with sort of essay planning, that sort of thing, it's more of an academic skills advisor thing. And it is important that you book with the right people, as I say, because otherwise you might end up a little bit disappointed when you come to your appointment and we can't help.
It's more efficient as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you find that there's any specific courses or students who access your services more? That might be a limitation of my knowledge, but in my perception, arts wouldn't so much, but I suppose they do still have the essay writing and different things.
So we definitely do have, in terms of one-to-one bookings, a very high percentage of health students booking, and that's largely due to the nature of their dissertations and their research proposals. They have to do a systematic search for their work, which basically entails like a very structured way of searching that's really new and unfamiliar. So we do get a lot of one-to-one bookings from health students, but we also do get some from business, some from art, some from technology. It is just a very large proportion coming from that health discipline, because the assignment is so focused on finding information in a specific way.
The nature of it.
Yeah. Usually if students find their own ways of finding information, and so long as they're accessing the academic information and they're using appropriate information, so not just relying on websites, that sort of thing, but actually delving into the research that's available on their topics, doesn't matter too much how they get to it. But with the health students and their systematic search, it does matter how they get to it, which is why they need our help.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the university doesn't have a maths course, but I know that one of the services is a maths academic skills advisor for the statistics and stuff like that.
Yeah, so David is absolutely amazing. So he's really good because he has, I don't know how he does it, but he has like such an expansive knowledge of maths that he can help in pretty much any discipline, because he applies that base knowledge to pretty much any subject. So he can help with like the nursing calculation stuff all the way through to like the advanced computing things that I don't even fully understand. And he also can help with like statistics, as you mentioned, like quantitative analysis of data, SPSS, that sort of thing. So his remit is like really quite broad in terms of what courses he helps with and who he can help with. So I would just say, if you're struggling with any aspects of maths on your course, you can book with him in the same way that you'd book with a learning teaching librarian or an academic skills advisor. He does still do embedded sessions, and he is still around in that way, but sometimes it's dependent on whether your course team thinks that you're struggling a lot with a particular thing, or if everyone is struggling quite a lot with a particular thing. So if you personally are struggling, it's always worth booking a one-to-one, and he's going to be really good at helping you work through those complex things. I would use it if I was doing any sort of maths in my degree.
Fantastic.
For sure.
It as well.
I think I wish I used the learning services more when I was a student. To be fair, I was one of those students to kind of just like tried to kind of find a way of doing it yourself, which took up more time than if you just went to the services. Yeah,
the service we offer is actually really, I think in some ways quite unique. And a lot of, like when I was a student, I wasn't even aware that this was a thing that happened. So I wasn't even aware that they offered those services. I'm still not sure that they did offer those services. It's hard to say. But the one-to-one appointments and how much time we dedicate to one-to-one appointments is definitely, a service that if I was a student, I'd be using all the time, or as much as I could, particularly around assignments. Obviously, we have to only take certain appointments within reason. We can't be seeing one student like over and over and again, because the appointments are limited. But, checking in once or twice a year if you're struggling, if you've received a particularly difficult bit of feedback for you to get your head around, that sort of thing. Booking with an academic skills advisor is great. If you're at the very beginning of your course and you have no idea how to access any of the library resources or where to start, booking with a librarian is a really great idea. So just thinking about what assignments you have coming up and what you need to do and where your knowledge sits, and then thinking about, would it be useful to come to a workshop or book a one-to-one is definitely something that people should consider doing, and it might really help them. Certainly the feedback we get is that it's really helpful and that makes people feel much more comfortable in what they're doing. But also a bit of feedback that we get is that people aren't even aware of what we do, or they're not aware that this is an option. So just trying to spread the word and make sure people are aware that this is a thing that we do, and people can come and talk to us and we'll try our best to help. Is really important.
Absolutely. I think sometimes as well there's the element of being quite vulnerable to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but you're not supposed to know what you're doing when you're a student, and that's what these services are for fundamentally.
No question is a stupid question, absolutely. So basically, we have a whole spectrum of students who visit us for a variety of different reasons, and I don't think I've ever encountered a question yet where I've been like, that's a weird question, or that's it just doesn't happen, because we understand when you come to university, it's big, it's confusing, there are so many things and rules that you have to get your head around which you haven't had before. And when I was a student, when I was trying to navigate the library, I had no idea what I was doing. I work in a library now and I'm a librarian now, but I can promise you I had absolutely no idea how to navigate any of the resources. I didn't understand why I could access some things but not other things. I couldn't get my head around all of the different parts of the library and all of the bits I had to access. And that's completely normal. It's completely expected. And we're not going to be surprised that you're using Google for the most part when you start. Yes. We're here to help you get better and use different resources. But absolutely, we're not going to be surprised or shocked or offended if you're using Google.
Opens up so many more options when you use them. The proper search mechanisms. Oh my God, there's so many more papers than I realised.
Yeah, and knowing what approaches you can take and what things you need to think about when you're searching Google. There are loads of different ways that you can refine what you're doing and make searching much less painful. We appreciate that it's long-winded and it's difficult, and sometimes you end up with what you want and sometimes you don't, and it's really frustrating. And that's what we're here for, to make it easier and to make it less stressful and to give you techniques that you can take away for the rest of your degree and use again and again and again. That's what our main aim is. We don't necessarily have any priority about making you use all the library resources exclusively or using Google exclusively. We're here to just make your lives easier, basically, and make things more accessible to you.
That's fantastic. Thinking forward slightly to the other side of the student journey when you've graduated, because you can still utilise the library as an alumni, can't you? Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically the university library is accessible to alumni for a reduced fee. So it's £15 per year, which generally is a pretty good price given that you're accessing still all of the resources. The main thing to be aware of if you do sign up for alumni membership is that you borrow a reduced number of books. You're allowed 4 books that you can borrow at any one time. But also you can only access e-resources on campus when you're actually in the library. Okay. So that's really important to be aware of, because some people sign up for membership and then they're kind of confused about, where and why they access things. But that's pretty standard across all universities. It's just based on, your login as a student and what you can and can't access. So we have to give you a temporary login, which can only be used on site. So that's why you have to come onto site and use the resources. But it's still a really useful resource if you want to continue studying, for example. Equally, if you're going on to a master's in another university, so say you're planning on staying in Ipswich, but you're going to go to Essex or you're going to go to UEA for a master's, something like that. We also support Sconnell membership, which is basically free to use. And it's you just sign up via the Sconnell's Access site. And this is also a good tip for any students who are studying now and want to access other university libraries. But it basically... everyone or most university libraries in the UK sign up to the Sconnell scheme, which means that our students can free move between our different libraries. So students can visit our library who are from other universities, and you as a student can visit other libraries from our university. You have to go through the approval process first. We have to check your account is in good standing, that sort of thing, so you don't have loads of overdues or ridiculous numbers of books on your account that have been lost for ages. But once that's happened, you can then approach different university libraries and say, hey, I live in Norwich. It would be really great if I could access UEA library or Colchester, for example. Or if you're going on holiday to, I don't know, Reading or something, you can visit those libraries. So it's quite, I mean, I'm a library nerd, so I love seeing other libraries. But even if you're wanting to study and go to different places, it can be quite useful. And our students who are potentially studying at other university libraries or go on to study at other university libraries can come back to UOS via that same scheme. So that's a really important thing to be aware of as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you use it?
I have used it before, yeah. So there's another fun thing is that as university staff, you can also do that.
Fantastic.
So if you wanted to visit other university libraries, you could do that. I mean, there are different bands to it. So a lot of undergraduate students would be reference only, so they wouldn't be able to go to those libraries and borrow books.
Yeah.
But depending on whether, you're a postgraduate or a PhD student or a staff member, you would have different usage bands, which might allow you to loan things or not loan things.
That's really interesting to know as a staff member as well.
So it's a really handy thing that you might want to use. If you've got like a work from home day or something and you don't have meetings, you want to go somewhere
somewhere new.
Yeah. So it's a cool thing that we do, and not a lot of people know about it because it's just
of course.
sort of one of those hidden things that that's really useful and really helpful, but people just don't know about.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you sharing all that, and those that are listening hopefully find that useful and maybe reach out to services
for sure.
As a result. So something that we like to do is discuss a bit more about yourself and your journey at the university. So what first attracted you to applying for the university?
So I went to UEA as an undergraduate and I was doing English literature. And then when I graduated, I had that classic panic of like, what am I going to do now? Which is pretty standard. So if any of the listeners are like approaching graduation or have just graduated, it's pretty standard. Normal. Everyone feels that way. But you end up falling into your niche, which is sort of what happened to me. So when I was in my first year of undergraduate, I started doing some work experience volunteering for the public library in Suffolk, so Suffolk Libraries. And I basically was going to Ipswich County Library, seeing what was going on, and then, just working for free, basically. And after that, they gave me a relief contract, which basically is just casual work when you want it. And because of the number of staff that they have at Suffolk Libraries, there's always shifts going, basically. So I was a casual staff member, worked around my study and was basically working in a public library. And as part of that, I worked mainly at Ipswich County Library, but I also worked at Gainsborough Library as well. So I got quite like a varied experience. And basically when I graduated, I was unsure about what I wanted to do. So I was unsure whether I would just sort of like try some typical graduate jobs or whether I was going to, I really enjoyed working in libraries, but I wasn't sure if that was the path I wanted to take. And I'd been working as a receptionist at UEA, which was like a temporary contract. And a job came up at the University of Suffolk for a library assistant post. And it was part-time. And I was like, I'm not sure about part-time. I want a full-time job. Not really sure where this is going to go. But I applied for it anyway, and I ended up getting the job and accepting it. And pretty much immediately I ended up progressing upwards. So it ended up to be like a perfect choice for me. But I ended up doing some more library administration, and then a new role was introduced, which was a graduate trainee librarian role, where the university actually funded my qualification as a librarian. So I moved into this post, got that job, and then did my master's in information science, which is what you need to become a librarian in the UK. And then I did also the PG CAP at the University of Suffolk as well after I finished my master's, which is a teaching qualification you need to teach in higher education in the UK. So all as part of that, they funded my study, nice, neat little package. And then after all that was finished, a librarian post became available, and then I slipped into that one. So I've been able to progress really well here. And I wouldn't say that I started out thinking I'm going to be a librarian. I just ended up stumbling into libraries and then sort of being like, I enjoy this. And then I ended up becoming qualified as a librarian, and here I am today. So for me, the path was very much to do with like the nature of the role. But obviously, I've been lucky to work at the University of Suffolk, who have supported me so much in becoming the librarian I am today. And I do really love working in higher education with students. I really enjoy the sector, and I really value what I do every day, and I really get a lot of gratification from sort of supporting students and making a difference in that way. So it's ended up being the right career choice. But
yeah, absolutely.
for any new graduates, this is sort of what it's like. You stumble into something and you end up being like, I really like this, or I'm not sure about this, and then you just sort of work like that. So it's a bit scary, but you find your path in the end.
Sometimes taking the leap of faith as well.
Yeah. So the part-time job definitely worried me to begin with, because I didn't really want to move back in with my parents or do that whole thing. But in the end, it turned out to be perfect. I ended up getting more shifts and I ended up getting a full-time job out of it, and, you know, qualifications and all that wonderful stuff. So sometimes it is just a leap of faith. What seems right to you at the time, go with your gut, I guess, and then see where it goes, really.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is your favourite part of your job?
It's tricky because there are so many things that I really enjoy. I think probably it's tied for two things. So first thing, I really love having one-to-ones with students where it makes a clear impact on the student and they come away feeling like visibly lighter having had a conversation. So particularly with these sort of the health students who are doing their dissertations and things, they can feel quite stressed coming into it because it's very new, it's very different. They have to record what they're doing, they have to search in a very specific way, and it's really stressful to have to approach that when you've got lots of other things going on. So coming into a one-to-one with a student where you can really easily break down what it is they're expected to do and they come away feeling relieved, that's really nice to feel like you've had that positive impact. And the other thing that I really like doing at the minute is improving processes, sort of for the same reason. So I've spent a lot of time working with the Associate Director of Library and Learning Services and my team to try and refine what we're doing and make our processes quicker so that we can make the experience of everyone better. And for some reason, there's something really satisfying about fixing something that was a bit of a mess, a bit muddled up, and then tidying it all up and putting like Power Automate in there to make it a bit quicker. So I really like both of those things about my job.
So that might be a good example of one, but is there anything at the university that you're most proud of?
Oh, I think overall, I'm quite proud of like how far I've come as an individual in the time that I've worked here. So I used to be very shy, very averse to public speaking, very just, you know, I don't think I could stand up in front of a group of people and sort of teach them. And obviously through the qualifications that I've got, through, you know, the PG Cap, I've managed to like get much better at that and get much more confident. So I can see like when I came in as a sort of 22-year-old through now I'm 27, I feel like there has been a definite transition in myself. So overall, like my personal development has been massive and really significant for me, and I can see that I've developed as a person in so many different ways. So that's really important, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of how far I've come and, you know, what I've achieved in that way. And in terms of just day-to-day stuff, probably I am proud of like those little tweaks that you make to things that make a big difference. So I worked with our team to revise our interlibrary loan process, which is basically where we request things from other university libraries in order to give you access to things that you wouldn't otherwise have. And before it was kind of quite a clunky process and it took quite long and it took ages to sort of get something from the very beginning of the process through to the end. So we wanted to revise it and make it quicker. And because we revised it and made it quicker, it feels like we're being much more efficient in what we're doing. So we have more time for other things, but also the experience on the other end is much better. So things like that, I find really satisfying and I'm proud of, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of touched on it speaking about your personal journey, but are there any other challenges that you've overcome, even as a student coming into higher education or, you know, throughout your career as you've developed to be now in the role that you're in?
So for me, I was the first in my family to go to university. I was from sort of like, I wouldn't necessarily like say like a really like deprived area or location, but like it was definitely a bit of a step for me to come to university. No one had done it before. My family weren't necessarily aware of how the higher education system worked. None of my sisters had gone, you know, so it was a very new thing for me to do. And I appreciate anyone else who's the first in their family to go to university has probably gone through this as well. It's really daunting. Like you're moving to a completely new place, you're 18 years old, you don't know what the heck you want to do with the rest of your life. And nobody else has done it before. So you don't have any sort of guidance about what it's like or how it feels or any of that. So that was a real step for me. And I remember being like 18 and being like, I don't even know if I want to go to university. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. And I ended up applying, going for like UCAS stuff, and ended up going to university, which was a massive step for me personally out of my comfort zone. And that was really important, really significant for me. And when I got to university, it's not like the challenges stopped, because, you know, when you're the first in your family, everything is very new still. The way universities work, they're kind of strange and a bit unfamiliar when you first get into them. And I remember being so scared of going into the library and even touching the books on the shelf, because I wasn't sure that I was allowed to touch the books on the shelf. And I was like, these books seem really old. Should I be touching them? Am I allowed to do it? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And also having that fear that everyone around you knew what was going on and that you're the one person who doesn't know what's going on. So if anyone feels like that, I can completely sympathise. But standing here now as somebody who has not only gone through undergraduate study but has a master's degree and also has a postgraduate certificate, I can promise you that you do absolutely deserve to be where you are, and that you're not the only one feeling unsure or not like you should be, maybe feeling a bit of imposter syndrome, maybe feeling like you shouldn't be there. You're not the only one, and it will pass. You'll get more and more confident as you go through, and nobody is expecting anything extreme of you at level 4 either. Nobody's expecting you to like produce something absolutely amazing. They're just trying to settle you in. So ask all of the questions that you have. Don't feel like you're the only one who doesn't know what's going on, and just like make the most of it, because it's intimidating and scary, but they are really fun years if you can fully throw yourself into it, and it's really fun to study like a subject that you're really interested in and passionate about, rather than having to do lots of different A-levels and GCSEs for the first time. So yeah, for sure, that's what I'd say.
Well, how about during COVID? I guess that was quite a challenging period.
Yeah, for the library it was really interesting actually, because I mean, a lot of we kind of had to readjust what we thought, how we perceived libraries to be and what services they offered, because a lot of people think of libraries and they think books on shelves. That isn't often the case with higher education libraries, because we have whole loads of online stuff that people use or don't use but exists nonetheless. So a lot of the work that we were doing was trying to shift people towards using online stuff, because we basically had to close the library for a few months in the middle of COVID. And it was a real challenge because, you know, all of the staff who were used to doing everything on site with paper-based things and like working with students directly suddenly had to shift online, and we had to basically change the way we did things entirely. So I wasn't a librarian then, I was a graduate trainee. So I was responsible for supervising the front of house service as part of that job. So basically a lot of the stuff that I was doing was trying to get all of the staff to move all of the processes that were previously paper-based to online without having to go into the office. So it was a real challenge. And obviously the librarians at that time were basically having their own challenges, because they were trying to migrate as much content online as possible. So anything that wasn't usually accessible as an ebook or an e-textbook, they were having to try and figure out a way of getting this print book digitized so people could use it. So the library definitely, it was a bit of a struggle. And when we reopened, it was still quite difficult, because obviously we had like a click and collect system for a while. We were trying to figure out if we needed to quarantine books or not, and how long for. We were trying to maintain the space and allow people to come in and study, but obviously people who were living together were trying to study together, and we had these specific rules around you have to be one person per table, and people were getting frustrated. So it was definitely a challenging time. And obviously we were navigating that with everyone feeling kind of scared and worried and like what's going to happen. So it was definitely a lot of pressure, but I mean, I think we came out of the other side of it with a new idea of how the library should work. And I think students particularly started to perceive that actually there was a lot of online stuff and they didn't have to come into the library to access library resources. And that was a really important shift from our perspective.
Yeah,
for sure.
Of course. Do you find that it stayed like that, or because we're kind of in a post-COVID era, if you could call it that, but we're definitely not in a pre-COVID position. So have you found that the way students access materials and resources has changed?
I'd say it's definitely different. I mean, our footfall in terms of number of students actually in the building has never gone back to the same level that it was. So that would either suggest that students aren't using the library at all, or they are largely using the online resources. And I would say we have seen an increase in terms of the amount of online resource usage we're using, but also the amount of online resources that we're actually purchasing. So I would say that definitely physical presence, or the physical library space, has become less of a priority, and more of the online library space is sort of, I guess, more prevalent now and more significant. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just gives us an opportunity as a library to reconsider how we use space and reconsider, obviously we want to have print books because they are important, and sometimes we can't get ebooks, which is a whole other conversation. But also, like, it gives us opportunities to think about how we make the library space interesting in its own right to come and use and come and study. And so how can we make the study spaces better? How can we make spaces for people to come in and sort of relax as opposed to just come in and study? So we've made like the wellbeing collection, for example, to give people a reason to come in and loan books that they otherwise wouldn't think to use, or think that they would access as part of their study, or they'd go to a public library for. So we've had to sort of reconsider what the library is for, I think, a little bit, and what sort of space we want to offer. So it's definitely different. And obviously it's been a challenge to navigate that, and it's kind of obviously making sure that the library remains really important and the heart of the university, as we describe it here, while also having more of an online presence. It's a challenge, but it's one that I think we're sort of navigating around.
So in terms of maybe students that are considering joining the university and not 100% sure, what sort of advice would you give to them? I know you said when you joined you were kind of similar kind of boat.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing I'd say, because this is definitely something that I experienced, I sort of touched on it already, that I felt really anxious about using the library. I felt really insecure that I wasn't using it properly. I felt really like I wasn't fitting in with the space in a strange way. And it's an actual phenomenon. We call it library anxiety. And students often start university with a really high degree of library anxiety because they don't know how to use the space, they don't know how to access the resources, and they're worried that everyone is judging them because of it. Nobody is judging you. We absolutely understand if you don't understand the Dewey Decimal System. We're here to help you. That's what the help desk is for. I promise you, we've had the question before and we're not shocked that you're asking it. So basically, I guess try not to feel so in your head about using the library resources and library services. If you don't feel like you understand something, ask the question. And 9 times out of 10, it's a question we've received 10 times that day already. Like, it's not something that only you don't understand. It's a thing that most people don't understand because it's not obvious. As I say, academic libraries are different to public libraries. They're different to things that services you've used before. And that's okay. And they're set up that way to make it possible for you to access a whole range of different resources. But they are different. And it's okay for you to not know how to use it immediately. And that's what we're here for. That's what the help desk is there for, like, to support you in accessing the resources. And that goes for pretty much any university experience, really. If you feel like you don't understand what's going on, or you're confused, or you need help, just ask the question, because that's why we have so many support services. Because we understand it's difficult and the transition is difficult, and you don't have to go through that alone. That's probably my main bit of advice, I'd say.
Really important. Yeah, absolutely. We know that you did your postgraduate, you did your master's here. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey? Did you do it on a part-time basis? Because you mentioned it was funded, by the university, which is something that is offered for some staff as well. So could you tell us a little bit more?
So I did 2 qualifications. One of them was my information science is quite a niche course, so it was with Northumbria University. And then my postgraduate certificate was with the University of Suffolk. So I kind of have like those 2 experience. So with Northumbria University, because it's up north, quite a long way in Newcastle, that was distance and part-time. So that was a very different type of learning than I was used to. My postgraduate qualification was I think it was a year long, but that was also part-time. It's not a full postgraduate qualification. It's sort of like a bit of a postgraduate that's sort of it's sort of like a PCG basically, which is more of a professional qualification. But that was part-time and it was on campus because it was being offered by the University of Suffolk. My information science qualification, it was really different for me because I was used to studying as an undergraduate full-time, like 18-year-old student going in. That's all I did other than a bit of work on the side. And my information science qualification was really challenging because I was working full-time. I was basically picking up all of this additional stuff on top of what I was already doing. And my life isn't as complex as a lot of the students that we see. I don't have kids. I don't necessarily have like a really difficult home situation that I'm navigating, but that was still hard, like working full time and studying at the same time. But it's one of those things where the university definitely supported me. I was given like some study leave days, for example. So I didn't have to be in, I think I was given one study leave day every 2 weeks. So I could sort of like allow some work to build up and do it on that study leave day. But it was definitely challenging. Not so challenging that I couldn't work through it, but it was definitely a challenge in time management and figuring out what time I had to do what, while also getting that downtime and that balance. The main thing I'd say to students is not to push yourself to do things all of the time, every single day, and to make sure that you do have downtime where you're not studying, because if you are spending all of your time doing that, you end up not actually doing your best work anyway. So it's better to reserve fixed times at fixed like days of the week, for example, where you know it's going to be quiet and you know that you're going to have the capacity to actually engage with the thing you're trying to do, and then use your time then, rather than trying to just like do bits all of the time or go home immediately and set up your study and then sort of half focus because you're drained from the day. So that's probably the main thing I'd say coming out of that qualification. Dissertation was probably the worst part because that was really intense. I had to do a whole research study. But you get through it, you manage, you just need to make sure that you're prioritising yourself as well as your study. The PG CAP was probably easier because it was on site and I was seeing everyone who was doing it was in the same boat as me. So everyone was sort of working full time or some variation of, and they were doing the qualification while they were working. And they were on site, like sort of sessions as well. So it would just be like Wednesday afternoons, every 2 weeks, there'll be a session and you go to the session and then, you know, you do your work and then you do your reading and that's fine. It was still a challenge and the same sort of applies. You have to make sure that you're reserving specific time to do that, but not all of your time because then it becomes impossible. I know I've talked to a lot of students who basically feel like they have no time outside of, you know, caring for kids, placement, study, work, all of this stuff. And it's definitely really challenging, but I would definitely say prioritising at least a bit of time per week so that you have some downtime, because otherwise you just get burnt out and it's not good for anyone to get burnt out. So, yeah.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's really helpful advice. So we come to our final question now, which is our regular viewers know it's our answer one, ask one question. So the question has been posed by Daisy Robinson from Access and Participation. So she sort of tried to do a question sort of involved in her role, kind of, as it were. Yeah. So her question is, when you were applying for university as an undergraduate student, what was the one thing that was holding you back from sort of pressing that submit button on your application?
Oh, probably just fear, profound fear of what was going to happen. So I think for me, it was very much like, is this the right course? If it's not the right course, what am I going to do if it's the right course? I'm going to be getting into a lot of debt for this. What if that ends up crippling me for the rest of my life? Probably every standard concern. So definitely it was just fear of like, I'm going to have to move and study somewhere and meet all of these new people. And I'm scared of that. I'm going to have to apply for student finance. And what is that debt going to look like in 10 years from now? I'm scared that this isn't the right course for me. All of those things. I mean, all of those things ended up not being as much of a big deal as they thought they were, to be honest. So, you know, moving into halls was hard. It's a bit of a culture shock. It's very different to like living at home with your parents, but you end up making friends. It ends up being fine. It's not that bad. You just sort of adjust to it and you adjust quicker than you think you would. With finance, it's actually fine. And I'm still not paying back crippling amounts of money per month, just what you can afford basically. So that's also fine. Try not to think about how much overall debt there is, because I mean, I know people say it's not real debt, that sort of thing. I mean, I try not to worry about it too much and know that eventually it will get written off anyway. So I've sort of put that to the back of my mind. And then the other fear, which is basically just, is it the right course? I mean, a lot of the time, it doesn't necessarily matter unless you're going into a very specific discipline, like you want to be a doctor, obviously you need a medical degree for that. But when you're sort of more of like a ephemeral arts or something like sort of me or humanities, it doesn't necessarily matter which course you do. It just matters that you have a degree overall. So like panicking too much about the degree you choose doesn't actually end up being, I mean, I ended up going into a discipline that I didn't need an English literature degree for. I could have had any other degree, but I needed the degree as a baseline to get into the qualification that I have now. So it doesn't necessarily matter which you choose. If you do feel like you obviously want to go into a specific discipline, then it's worth having a think about what subjects you need to do that. But you probably have considered that already if you have A-levels and that sort of thing in order to get onto those degrees by then. So I would just say try not to worry too much about it. And it feels like you're making decisions for the rest of your life when actually people can pivot, you can be agile, you can do another degree if you really want to.
Yeah,
like there are lots of options, and it's sometimes worth just putting one foot in front of the other rather than trying to imagine your whole future when you're 18, because that's a really tricky thing to do. Borderline impossible, I'd say.
And in terms of maybe a question you've got for the next guest, which could be related to a role or anything related to university.
I'm always interested in how people like perceive the library or what they really value or don't value about the library. So I guess my question would be, what do you think, what's the best thing about the library service and what's the worst thing about the library service? Those are my two. I guess it's one question. I'm going to say it's one question.
we can do that. That's
I
think that's a good question.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That was really great chat. And I think I've certainly learned a lot, and I think the listeners have as well. Mm-hmm. So until next time, it's goodbye from Anna.
Goodbye. It was lovely to talk.
It's goodbye from Lily.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from me. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to the Student Experience podcast. If you would like to be a future guest, email studentexperiencesteam@uos.ac.uk or follow the links to our podcast application form through our Brightspace page. You can also reach out to us through our Instagram page, UOS_student experience.